Ex-cons, what is the most fucked up thing about prison that nobody knows about? When you get out, the feeling of soft carpet on your bare feet is borderline orgasmic and you'll never take it for granted again. On a slightly lighter side, a sort of family friend recently got out of prison after 18 years for holding up a gas station for drug money. My uncle was his friend, and when the guy got out, my uncle said, "Man, there's this show you're gonna love called Game of Thrones." The guy laughed and said he was current on it. The in-prison black market was his source for a tiny 2-inch battery-powered screen and micro SD cards with the episodes on it. Every now and then it would be confiscated as contraband and he'd have to save up for a month to buy another. He also had a prison cat that knew to leave his cell before morning activities and to come back after lights out. He'd feed it little chunks of meat he smuggled out of the mess hall. One big thing for him was making sure to train the cat who to go to next, because there's definitely some people that would have killed it just for the unique experience. Edit. Humorously enough, my brother found the post and corrected something. He says the tiny little TV was something they were allowed to have, but the SD cards were what was contraband. Apologies for the mistake. When you get out, you miss the simplicity of choices. When you are in, all you think about is getting out and what you will do when that happens. Everything focuses around this. When you are out, at first, the input is enormous and a small part of you miss the simplicity. It's never quiet. Not in prison, but I volunteer in one. One time I was chatting up this huge black dude and I asked him what he did in his free time. He said he played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I was shocked. On the outside he would never be mistaken for a D&D player. White guy on the other side of me told me that D&D was huge in prison. I had no idea. Also, same guy makes tacos for everyone else and makes money doing it. I think he has a hot plate in his cell and uses commissary items as ingredients. Was listening to a podcast on the West Memphis 3. TL. DR3 dudes got life in prison for murdering a bunch of kids, but they were actually all innocent. One of the guys said the worst thing about prison was that during the summer, there was a million mosquitoes in his cell. The entire wall of his cell was red from the blood of all the dead mosquitoes he would slap and punch every day. They would be in his cell 24/7 just stinging him non-stop. While he slept, while he was taking a dump, while he was jerking off. It never ended. Most summer days he would just lay on the floor crying, wishing for death. Not a felon, but the wife of one. There are an unbelievable amount of rules that have to be followed, even for visitors. Some of them you can pick the rationale out, but a lot are just rules for the sake of rules. You don't follow, you get punished. The whole point seems to be to try and get you bothered, and remind you that you're powerless. Want to visit your loved one? Show up and wait to be called. You can't stand in this part of the lobby. Everyone on that side of the lobby, behind the blue line. No one goes in unless everyone's behind the line. When you filled out your paperwork, you used a line instead of an X in the checkbox. You have to redo everything, and your paperwork goes to the bottom of the pile. You better have read the 3 pages of dress code rules. If you did something wrong, you don't find out you need to change until you're about to go in. Hope you brought an extra outfit in your trunk, or you're off to find a Walmart. You're wearing the same outfit you've worn the last 4 times you visited? Too bad. The HBIC on duty today says you have to change. The whole thing is like going through the Tsar at the airport. Except the disgruntled, power-tripping government employees follow you onto the plane and you don't actually get to go anywhere. It bombing. I had a friend go to prison for a drug-related crime. He had his own cell and stuck to himself for the most part. Another inmate it into a water bottle and filled it to the brim with water and mixed it up into a slush. Said inmate then took the water bottle to my friend's cell, placed at the slit at the bottom of his cell door, and ducking stomped on it. It water sprayed absolutely everywhere, while my friend was in the cell too. Lots of officers sleeping on the job. I'm not an ex-con, but I have a friend incarcerated. There have been multiple deaths at her facility due to medical negligence by staff. A few months ago, an inmate was rolling around on the ground screaming in pain only to have staff laughing at her. She then died there an hour or two later. This is not the first time such a thing has happened. The US government will often outsource medical care to another company, for example a company somehow specializing in travel insurance. To quote her about the most recent death, the other inmates that witnessed this said the medical staff laughed while this lady laid in the floor gasping for breath. And this is not the first time this has happened. I've seen it so many times since I've been here and it is disturbing, scary, and we are powerless to do anything. The whole situation is screaming to be picked up by a local news service. Something else that came to mind was the lack of education some of these incarcerated women have, both in general and even about their own bodies. With one girl pouring industrial cleaning product inside her V2. Yeah. Clean it. Duck. My dad was in prison. In his situation, and in many others, you feel immense guilt after getting to know your fellow inmates. Because you're gonna get out. And they're not. Ever. How bad it smells from the poor hygiene of inmates and unclean facilities. For a non-Western prison in an anonymous country, they keep statistics on inmates, but often report false cause of death. When a prisoner is found tied to a bed beaten to death, he would be checked into hospital for a week before they finally report his death due to natural causes like cardiac arrest or dehydration. Administration staff do not want to get involved in keeping order, so they have a group of prisoners they elect to do it for them. This means this group gets special privileges from administration staff, where they turn a blind eye to abuse for the sake of keeping order. The ruling group gets unlimited power to extort, abuse and otherwise exploit everyone else, as long as they keep violence in the rest of the population down. The official staff keeps a distance and away from harm, but the rest of the prisoners are subject to a ruthless gang. The administration staff only interferes if their elected group does not keep order, which is when they elect a different gang to the role. Administration staff will manipulate rebellious inmates. They will create sympathy between the inmate and themselves and encourage them to stand up for what's right. They say they have a plan to help and continue meeting with these inmates, but any inmate that has repeated meetings with administration staff is seen as a tattletale that reports other inmate offenses. When others find out they meet with administration regularly, they do not last long. This is how the official staff remove people that rebel against the system. Then they report their death as a natural cause. 1 week later, everyone knows to stay out of this business. But sometimes people get trapped. Inmates will accuse other inmates they don't like of being tattletales to get them removed. They have no way out. They cannot go to the administration staff because they keep this system alive, and they cannot communicate with the outside world because all communication is intercepted. Not exactly a secret, but prisons make $sign off commissary. Many PPL think the prison system purposely underfeeds its inmates so they are more compelled to buy off them. $1.50 for 75-cent pastries. Ramen packs for $1. Prob .33 CPA. $10 for $1 long johns. etc. etc. Also the insane costs for phone calls. Honestly, there isn't any hidden truth about prison. Everything gets covered in the movies to one degree or another. Some of it's accurate and other parts are blown out of proportion, but the basic idea is displayed. The thing that most members of the public don't get is that it's a soul-crushing and dehumanizing experience that 99% of the time just makes people worse. Our prison systems, in the West, aren't about rehabilitation. They're about punishment and profit. They are about appearing tough on crime, etc. And what do people have to look forward to after they have paid their debt to society? Ongoing discrimination, social isolation, etc. Basic things like getting a job, applying for a rental property, getting utilities connected. There's a good reason why recidivism rates are at 80% or so, depending on how many years it takes to return. Guards can and will withhold medical treatment. When I was in county jail, there was an older woman, vomiting profusely. She couldn't keep water down. Her skin was tenting and she was hallucinating. I explained all this to the guards and that she needed medical treatment immediately. For 2 days she was like that until I transferred out. I have no idea what happened to that woman and I still think about her. This was in Georgia, USA. The most unlikely people are chess masters. Former prison librarian here. Dental care dentists won't fill your teeth. They will just pull them. No caps. No implants. Race prisons are still self-segregating in a lot of ways. When I worked in a prison in WV, one dorm had a black TV, controlled only by black inmates, and a white TV, controlled by only white inmates. Honor culture: if you call someone a name or steal from them, the other person must retaliate to save honor. As a result, you will see a lot of black eyes in prison. Postage stamps are a form of currency. Many prisons censor what books come into the institution. At one prison I worked in, The Art of War by Sun Tzu was banned simply because of the title. I assure you that no one in admin had ever read the book. Not a con, but recently learned something. Prisoners have to pay a bill for their incarceration after being released. Sometimes massive amounts of money that they obviously don't have, which just feeds back into the circle of getting arrested again. It didn't used to be a large percent of released people, but of course, like everything, it's gone up in recent years. The COs. The case managers. No medical gives a duck if you're dying. Put in a sick call. Wait 2 weeks for an appointment with a nurse. Not a DR. They only give you 15 pads a month for a period. The pads are like thin cotton balls with a sheath wrapper and a sticky strip, and that's all you get after you have a baby also. Doesn't matter how bad you're bleeding, whether you weren't there when they passed them out, or if they got stolen. If you can't buy some at canteen, you're ducked. Oh, and sometimes they shut down canteen for weeks, so you're ducked anyway. Canteen is the store. I was just released November 2018, so I could go on and on about all the ducked up it I seen and went through in my 2 years of being locked up in the largest women's prison in Oklahoma. Mabel Bassett Correctional Center is a ducking joke. My sister is in prison, and for me it's the access to the black market. Specifically, it's very easy to get hard drugs. Imagine sitting around with nothing to do, hating your situation, fighting depression, and knowing you can just get some cheap heroin. They use money from canteen, relatives, favors, etc. It's also generally accepted that if someone gets in trouble, getting them out of it is just a matter of sending $50 to a random Western Union. Also applies if they want to be moved to a different cell. That some guys will turn B and take turns taking and receiving, but when before they were locked up they were straight. That there are a lot of addicts in prison for nothing other than being in possession of the substance they are addicted to. No assault or robbery, theft, not even distribution. Simple possession. A neighbor of mine was locked up for murder and released sometime before I was born. It's one of those things where everyone knew about it but no one talked about it. I remember him telling me the story of why he was in there and what it was like. Very rarely did. And the most surprising thing in his experience was that the smaller, quieter, weaker, more vulnerable in general were typically left alone. It's only if you acted like a big shot did people want to fight you. Also, picking fights with said smaller, quieter, weaker, more vulnerable ones will instantly get you a non-stop flogging by other inmates until your spirit broke. The fact that literally every single aspect of the infrastructure is set up to be for profit, to exploit your family, from arrest quotas, to plea deal quotas, to the corporate run phone system. The prison labor gimmick: slave labor used to make products for company profit, not to better the community or help society. Prison is a business. A corrupt, criminal, awful business run by politicians and special interests that are more evil than the inmates. Not an ex-con, but former prison librarian. Inmates are not allowed to have intimate relations, including with themselves. They can get infractions for being caught masturbating. You never wake up feeling safe. Ever. There is so much hanging over your head that you may not be in control of that. The stress level is through the roof. It's not easy breaking out. Read Life After Death by Damien Eccles. He was one of the West Memphis 3 that were wrongfully charged for murder. He was on death row for 10 years or so and goes through all of the brutal details of death row. Really eye-opening. How itty the toilets can be. Especially when you have to share a cell or pod, and they basically have to listen to you in the middle of the night. I guess it's not really ducked up, but my dad said it drove him crazy when people wouldn't wear slippers in the showers, as without slippers it was one of the quickest ways to get nasty foot fungus.